Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, September 27th, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about the state of North Carolina. But no, we're not going to be talking about it from the perspective of the presidential election. Today, we are going to be focused on a new CNN poll released today in the Republican and Democratic governor election between Josh Stein, the Attorney General, and Mark Robinson, the Lieutenant Governor. What we found in this new CNN poll is Democrats have now expanded their lead massively to a 17-point advantage. Mark Robinson at just 36% of the projected vote share, according to CNN's most recent poll. Now, this is one of the first high-quality polls we have seen out of the state of North Carolina since the scandal that CNN actually broke just around a week ago, a scandal that has really plagued Mark Robinson's campaign, leading to over half of his staff in the lieutenant governor's office in his official capacity resigning from their positions. Alongside on the campaign side, a senior advisor left, his finance director left, his deputy campaign manager left, and guess what? Even his own campaign manager resigned as well. Mark Robinson is a sinking ship, and pretty much everyone knows that they don't want to be a part of that, and so the Republican Party entirely abandoned him. The National Republican Governors Association announced last week, immediately after the scandal, they would no longer be investing in the North Carolina governor's race. They were pulling all of their TV ads. They had slated millions of dollars likely to spend and hundreds of thousands across digital and other platforms in order to make Mark Robinson's outreach more stronger and more visible. They decided they're pulling it back. They're not going to do it. And now Mark Robinson is starting to see the full effects of this scandal that has really damaged his candidacy quite tremendously at just 36% again of that projected vote share, with Josh Stein with a 17-point advantage across this battleground state, the battleground state of North Carolina. And when you take a look at the CNN poll, in particular, why this might be, a big reason for this is because Mark Robinson's approval rating has taken such a significant dip. When it comes down to how people view Josh Stein, he has an overall net favorability rating of 17 points across the state, meaning 17% more people view Josh Stein, the Attorney General, favorably than unfavorably. Usually this splits far more down partisan lines. Usually this splits far more down a 50-50 split, especially in battleground states. Josh Stein, however, has the upper hand. When it comes down to the case of Mark Robinson, it's very different, because not only is it not just, a 50-50 split, Mark Robinson holds just a 27% favorability rating to an unfavorability rating of 53%, a 26-point delta. Mark Robinson's approvals were never super strong, but to be down -26 when your opponent is up +17, you are talking about a massive, massive difference between the two candidates that is so deep-rooted and fundamental to this election that Mark Robinson is doomed from the beginning at this point. With around 30 days to go until the election, there is no possible pathway to recovery for Mark Robinson, and now the polls are starting to reflect that. Because even in the aftermath, the first poll conducted after the scandal, it showed Josh Stein with only a 10-point lead. Now, I want us to ground ourselves for a moment. In using the term only a 10-point lead for a Democrat in North Carolina, hell must have frozen over. But far more than that has happened in this North Carolina governor's race, because clearly voters aren't just giving Josh Stein that double-digit victory begrudgingly at 10 points. It's not 11, it's not 12, it's not 13, it's not 14, it's not 15, it's not 16, it is 17 points in this battleground state. North Carolina, again, the state Democrats have only been able to win on the presidential one time in decades, in 2008, by 14,000 votes, 0.33%. Indiana voted to the left of North Carolina in 2008, but 2004, Republicans, 2000, Republicans. In fact, every election until you go back to Jimmy Carter, that was the last time Democrats won North Carolina by a considerable amount. And even then, Jimmy Carter, in theory, would be underperforming that of Josh Stein's victory in this election should the CNN poll come to reality. And in a way, I actually do think this poll is quite valid when it comes down to accurately gauging the sentiment of this race. Fox News also just did a poll showing Josh Stein with a 16-point advantage, just 1 point running behind that of CNN. These things matter, right? You have some really strong polls here. CNN is A-rated, Fox News is A-rated. These polls are strong, and they come from dueling networks with no real vested interest in seeing a shift in favor of Democrats or Republicans. And ultimately, what we are finding here is that even before the scandal, we saw a lead here. Fabrizio Lee and Associates and John Anzalone, you can see they had a 10-point lead, AARP, 10-point lead for Josh Stein, pre-scandal poll. Marist College did a poll, 11-point lead. Now, The first polls conducted entirely post-scandal, 17 points, 16 points, massive, massive advantages. This race has gone overnight practically, from being more competitive to being safe. When this race started out, I knew Democrats were going to win it. But what did the polls say? What did the polls tell us about this battleground race? Well, why don't we take a look? According to the data points earlier on, Mark Robinson actually led in about 7 out of the 10 most recent polls taken all the way back in 2023. Every single poll taken between 2022 through the end of 2023, with the exception of just 2, had Mark Robinson ahead. And you're talking roughly 10 polls conducted in this time. 48% support for Mark Robinson. 2-point lead, 3-point lead, 1-point lead, 3-point lead, 4-point lead, 4-point lead. Large leads, enough in comparison rather, for Mark Robinson, the lieutenant governor. Then 2024 hit, and Democrats started investing heavy into this race. They started going after Mark Robinson for the things he did, and up until around May and June, right, even polls released in June of 2024, 3 months ago, Mark Robinson led. His most recent poll that he led in was 4 points, 4-point lead, June 7th through June 11th. 4-point lead for Mark Robinson. But then Democrats let everything hit the fan for Mark Robinson. Attack ad after attack ad after attack ad, and now he does not lead in a single poll, and it is a near guarantee at this point that Mark Robinson is finished in this state. You can see, too, the political ratings from some very respected networks here show us that ultimately Josh Stein has a massive advantage. You remember what this looked like before. You can go on Wayback Machine, you can go on Wikipedia's history, you can see that it at some point was very much a toss-up in the state of North Carolina. It was not at all a position that people looked to and said, all of a sudden, where, this race is so competitive, but still, Democrats are going to come out with a 15-point lead. Nobody thought that, right? You can take a look when we go all the way back. Let's see if we can look back 100. I guess it's probably going to have a lot of edits because of the recent scandals here, so maybe we should go down to the 500s to see where we were back in 2023. Even then, okay, this is going to be really, really painful to look at, but let's take, January. For instance, let's see, hopefully it loads here. We can take January and take a look at what the ratings tell us about the race. Inside Election said it's a toss-up. The Cook Political Report said it's lean D. Larry Sabato's Crystal Ball said it's a toss-up. Elections Daily said it was a toss-up. Why? Because it looked like it was going to be a toss-up. In January of 2024, this is what the polling landscape looked like. On average, Mark Robinson was up 3 to 4 points statewide. And so, in just a period of time, you can see Mark Robinson, who had a lot of these scandals really surfaced back in 2020, but nobody knew about it in the governor's race, again, from near total toss-up to being a state that now Democrats look at and say, we have this in the bag beyond belief. And the impact of it might not even just translate to the governor's race, but might also translate to down-ballot ramifications for Republicans across the state and potentially even coattails enough to bring Kamala Harris over the finish line in this state. And so I think Mark Robinson, one, never should have ran for this seat. I think when you take a look at everything we know about him as a candidate, again, many of these scandals came back in 2020. There are plenty of things here that come in. But when you take a look at the comments that are deemed anti-Semitic, these are comments that he made back in 2020. These are things that surfaced in some cases in 2019 and 2020 when he was running for lieutenant governor. When he made comments about the LGBTQ community, when he said after the 2016 Pulse nightclub shooting that homosexuality is still an abominable sin, and I will not join in celebrating gay pride in response to a shooting of innocent beings in Orlando, Florida. This is something that we knew. This is something that many people knew. In June of 2021, he talked about the idea that transgenderism and homosexuality, as he put it, is filth. These are his own words. These are things that we knew about in 2021. And yet, Donald Trump endorsed him. The state party cleared the field for him. They heralded him, Donald Trump's own words, Mark Robinson, as being Martin Luther King Jr. on steroids. Now, that same guy is losing the governor's race by 17 points and might just be the reason why CNN has now found a tie in North Carolina, despite polls in previous matches showing Kamala Harris losing to Donald Trump in North Carolina. The average here of Kamala Harris losing, but CNN and Fox News show the race within a point or a tie. Big reason for that, these are some of the only polls that have been conducted post-scandal. Some of the only ones that have been conducted. And so Donald Trump, who at one point against Biden was leading by 5.4%, the last poll before Biden dropped out had him up 7 points. A combination of factors here have led to the ultimate narrowing of the race. When it was Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, the initial poll said it was a 6-point race, then it became a 3-point race, and then it narrowed, and it narrowed, and it narrowed, and today it's a 1-point race, and it's a tie, according to CNN. The big reason for that, given how close this race is, could very well be Mark Robinson. And should Kamala Harris win North Carolina, she could very well thank Mark Robinson for that too as well. Because while there certainly is a level of effort, enthusiasm, energy, on the ground, engagement, the 4 E's that I just mentioned, these are things that are indicative of a very, very strong Democratic campaign. Reminiscent of that of Obama in 2008, which is really good for Kamala Harris. At the same time, North Carolina is still close. Again, Obama's presence in 2008 was something that should be revered for decades to come for the National Democratic Party. Michigan was a 17-point victory for Obama. Wisconsin was a 14-point victory for Obama. Nevada was a 13-point victory for Obama. Iowa was a 10-point victory for Obama. In North Carolina, what happened? Obama won it by 0.33%. This is how close and competitive North Carolina really loves to be. Honestly, a very attention-seeking state when it comes down to swing states, right? Because what they're doing here, and that obvious jokes, but what they're doing here is showing very close and competitive races. Now, North Carolina wasn't always that way, right? In 2004, it was 12 points, but since then has been a really, really difficult nut to crack for the Democratic Party. That even in 2008, it took them going through hell and high water to even get to a fraction of a percentage point margin victory in that state. So if it happens, and if Kamala Harris wins those 16 electoral votes from North Carolina, I was thinking back in 2020 when it was 15, she will have Mark Robinson to thank. Because Donald Trump has had a clear and total advantage in the state throughout the duration of the Biden-Harris campaign. There was not a point that we thought Joe Biden would win North Carolina. Never in my rematch predictions did I have North Carolina as blue. But now I might. And now I do. My most recent matchup, Kamala Harris is in the advantage in North Carolina. Where we are today, she might not be according to 538, but I do think that there are some considerable portions of voters out there, especially disengaged young Americans, who care deeply about issues like LGBT rights, care deeply about issues like abortion that Mark Robinson has not gotten messaging on correct. There are plenty of instances where I could see Mark Robinson's comments inspiring college-aged voters to turn out and vote, young Americans to get to the ballot box just for the purpose of voting against Mark Robinson. And why does that matter? Well, their likelihood of voting for, Democrats in North Carolina down the ballot increased tremendously. That's how this works. That's how many of these things work. People don't just vote for one race. Very rarely does that happen. They will likely be voting for everyone. And when it comes down to North Carolina, it's really good for the Democratic Party if that happens. Because Mark Robinson inspiring anybody to vote in a down ballot race means they're almost nearly guaranteed to vote on the presidential. There are plenty of voters out there, hundreds of thousands, millions across America, who literally only vote in the presidential. So if you're already getting out for the governors, you're getting out for the presidential too. And if you weren't inspired by Kamala Harris, you may be inspired because you're afraid and fearful of that of Mark Robinson. And now that he's deciding to stay in the race, put out an advertisement today from his wife, who put out a minute-long ad saying that she trusts Mark Robinson, and she's someone who knows him truly. I mean, he's doubling down on these things. He's denying it through and through, but everybody knows it, right? The RGA knows it. His members of his own campaign staff know it. His members of the Lieutenant Governor's office in North Carolina State Capitol know it. I mean, these are things that they have come to understand as whether they like it or not is associated with their candidate, associated with their guy. And as much as they, in some reality, would like to be perceived as people who have distanced themselves early enough, a lot of these things were very preventable. A lot of these things we knew were going to surface or knew were going to be liabilities, politically speaking, for a candidate like this. And the Donald Trump team, who used to campaign very heavily with Mark Robinson, is reading the writing on the wall. We just found out that Mark Robinson's campaign team has been served a notice from the Trump team that Mark Robinson is no longer welcome at a singular rally with Donald Trump or J.D. Vance. When Donald Trump visited North Carolina this past week, did he mention Mark Robinson once? The answer was no. But there's a catch here. Donald Trump was asked recently, will you decide to pull your endorsement of Mark Robinson? Same thing to J.D. Vance. Both of them had non-answers because they still want to keep that endorsement. They still want to be in cahoots with Mark Robinson, and it's clear, right? That's their Republican nominee for governor. They don't think that they should be abandoned, seemingly, right? And that will do damage to the Trump team, which is why I do think Mark Robinson being down 17 points, it is near impossible for me to see a map like this where Mark Robinson is down 17 and Donald Trump is up by 2 or 3. Donald Trump is likely losing North Carolina if Mark Robinson loses North Carolina by any more than 15 points. And that's because the amount of voters that would have to get out to get to that point because of how really difficult North Carolina is to crack. In any other state that was even a little bit more lopsided left-leaning, you'd be talking about a 30-point margin here, but you're not because it's North Carolina. It's competitive in nature. And so when you take a look at what we might be looking at in the future, again, should North Carolina go to Josh Stein by this margin, he's winning across the state, as well as Kamala Harris. But everything is weird about American politics today. Voters don't always vote together and in unison, and that's why there's so much cross-voting at this point. But overall, North Carolina, pretty bad position for the GOP compared to where they have been previously, and based on some of these numbers, I wouldn't be confident if I was Donald Trump going into this election this coming November. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the top left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.